Oakaazadoreyth, Part 5. My apologies for taking so long to keep you all updated. Time feels like an abstract concept at this point. It feels like moments ago that I downloaded a devious possessed mod, yet I can't remember. For some reason, a time where I wasn't wondering about the force of Oakaazadoreyth. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you probably need to read parts 1 through 4. Might as well get right to it. Time feels as if it's running out, or maybe it already has. Either way, here's what happened next. I've been wandering through the hold of Oakaazadoreyth for what seems like an hour. My initial plan was to simply walk into another hold to maybe break whatever this was by walking along the north path. I came to the three-way fork close to the edge of Oakaazadoreyth. The left path would have taken me to the Reach. The north and the right path would have taken me into the Whiterun hold. I tried all three, and the results were disheartening to say the least. I took the path on the left first, thinking my chances going into the Reach. The fog was dense and had grown in its intensity. What was 15 to 20 steps of visibility had turned to barely 10. I couldn't hardly make out the tree line on the edge of the path any longer. I walked forward for what only felt like a few seconds. When I came back to the fork I had just left, at no point did I feel as though I had gotten turned around. And I knew as much. I tried the left path again, and again I came back to the fork, entering from the right. It felt like I was playing Super Mario Bros. 3, and for those who remember the bonus levels where you could run to one side of the screen, disappear, only to reappear instantly on the opposite end, I tried the north path, and a moment later I was entering the fork again from the south. This was impossible. I spent 30 minutes sprinting in all three directions, only to end up back at the fork. I stood there in the middle of the path, navigating my menus, going through my shouts, and picked from the list Storm Call, and then shouted to the heavens. The sky above me darkened, and thunder clouds rolled into view, and the rain began to fall around me. And the storm came, and the lightning flashed for a moment. In a split second, there was a red dot on my compass, which indicates enemy, and then it was gone. What followed caused me to drop my controller. I had not seen anything or heard anything in over an hour. Now, on the other hand, it sounds like the entire forest is shrieking. So bad, in fact, that the visions of my character had blurred, as if he ate a bad alchemy ingredient. The camera begins shaking, and the pitch of the shrieking lowers and becomes almost demonic. I begin sprinting down the path to the south, back the way I had originally came. I would be taking the path that goes down by the lake and eventually, hopefully, take me into Whiterun hold and out of this forest. Several moments go by and the shrieking and disorienting camera shaking continues, but I am at least able to stay on the path and have successfully been able to leave the fork in the north. Running along the path and making the necessary turns, making sure I was following the correct path, trying not to fall for any curveballs the forest was surely throwing at me. I passed several of those fake paths on the way to the fork that would just take me by the lake, paths that were not there on the way up. I slowed from sprinting to a walk, and as my vision cleared, the camera went back to normal. The forest stopped screaming and all was silent once more. I come to the fork that leads to the lake and took to the necessary left. The fog at this point was becoming a little less intense, allowing for a tad bit visibility. I see a shape in front of me at the edge of the fog or path, and I use my detect life shout, and the shape begins to glow into a pink mist. I walk towards it. Something about this shape feels different than my other experiences on the path. It was a woman. I cautiously walk up to the NPC, expecting it to start screaming with a horrible twisted face, but nothing happened. As I got closer, the interaction option became available, and I pressed A. "Please, can you help me? I've been lost in this fog for so long now. I thought I heard my friend calling me and I ran towards their voice, but Then I heard them scream, "I just want to leave." I was only given one option to choose from in response, and responded with, "Who are you?" She responded with, "My name's Adona. I seen a child enter the forest while I was with a friend. I foolishly went after them, and left my child behind. I've been wandering on my own for I don't know how long, and it feels like an eternity before I saw you. I thought about putting an end to it and just walking to the lake, but at least that's what the whispers kept telling me to do. No, I don't want to. But they say it's the only way out of this forest." I was not given a response option to choose from. Instead, the NPC simply smiled and began walking off the path. I could not see the lake, but beyond the fog, or at least that's what my map showed. Once she was beyond the limits of visibility, I used my Detect Life shout and watched the pink mist walk downward. She must have gone into the lake. Suddenly, several pink mists formed around Adona and moved in on her. They became one, and then they were no more. She was gone. I looked through my menu and navigated to find the letter I had found outside the forest before I entered it, to give it one last read. I glanced over and felt a little sad for her. Her friend had looked for her and become lost themselves. She was in here alone the whole time. I quickly came to my senses and thought, "It's just an NPC, get over it." I examined the note and turned it around and was astonished and relieved. What had most certainly had not been there before was there now, a map of Falkreath Hold, and all the paths of real Falkreath. That wasn't all, though. There was also an X that nestled over the top of Riverwood, which is just outside of Falkreath Hold. Of course, this was the way out. You begin the entire game by going to Riverwood. Why didn't I think of that before? It was completely clear now, and I knew the map wasn't there before, and I can't help but feel as though it was Adonis's last will to see me safely out of the forest. So, I sprinted quickly towards the finish line, passing fake paths here and there. Whispers came and went as I ran past traps that I believe were placed to lure me in my haste. But this mod seriously underestimated my knowledge of the map of the game I was playing. Hundreds and hundreds of hours spent in this world. I know this place more than I know the real world, and yes, thinking about that last statement now seems a little sad, but I couldn't care less. I stopped for a moment to regain my stamina and to check my map. Riverwood was very close, which means that this forest was about to lose whatever sick game it was playing. Once my stamina regained, I could make it out of this godforsaken place in one more sprint. I could feel the finish line. The excitement rose in me like the fizz in a bottle of Coke with Mentos inside. I began sprinting again, and once I did, the forest began to shriek as it did before. Perhaps it knew it was going to lose. I kept going, and then I dropped my controller at the shrieking sound like it was coming from outside the game. I looked at my screen and was shaking again like it was before. The vision of my character blurred, and looking as though it had ate another bad ingredient. I picked it up and tried to sprint the rest of the way when I realized my stamina had been completely drained and I was refusing to replenish. The mod was fighting back. The finish line was up ahead, and once I crossed this nightmare over, I could delete the stupid thing from my Xbox and more than likely put Skyrim down for a while. I decided that if the mod wouldn't let me sprint to the finish line, then I would walk towards it. My vision blurred, or I could not still see the path, and even with my stamina drained, walking was definitely still an option for me. I dropped my controller again and turned my head to the ceiling. That came from inside my house, outside of the game. I turned my attention back to the screen and noticed that the camera and the character's vision had turned back to normal. I picked up my controller again. Thud! My controller leaves my hand once more as I look up to the ceiling. My bedroom. It sits directly above the living room. Thud! As I flinch at the sound as if it was whatever was up there was trying to come through the ceiling down on top of me. Thud! 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 It began moving across the room, above me, whatever it was. It was coming out of the bedroom and sounded as though it was leaning towards the stairs. I stood up from the couch and frozen in fear. My eyes had been following the sound as now were transfixed on the stairs, and that's when I heard it. Thud. Thud. With every step, I could hear the cracking and snapping of bones. Thud, thud, thud. A couple more steps, and I would see it come around the corner of my first landing of the staircase. Still frozen in fear, every fiber of my being was telling me to run, to do something, but I couldn't, as if my feet were glued in place. I wasn't going anywhere. My eyes widened and my mouth fell open. At the top of the first landing, I saw a black shape emerge halfway around the corner. I could make out individual strings of long, black hair as the shape drew further around the threshold. Thud! A massive, grotesque hand planted firmly against the wall opposite. The head of whatever was at the top of the landing, its fingers were long and bony and was attached to a long, slender, pale arm that appeared to be broken in several places. Its foot and leg were the next part of its body, passing the corner of the upstairs landing. Pale as its arm, devoid of any muscle mass, too, appeared broken in places it shouldn't have been. Snapped bone sticking out from its skin below the knee. Finally, it lowered its head around the corner. Its black, hollow eyes sat behind its long, black, stringy hair. We stood looking at each other for a moment. The fear I felt in my heart was accompanied by a deep sadness, and my body felt heavy, as if the world was crashing itself on top of me. I fell to my knees under the immense pressure. It was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. My vision began to blur as the thing began crawling down the stairs, using its arms and legs as if it could barely stand or walk. Thud! Thud! It was at the bottom of the stairs now, just feet away from me. Its arms reaching out at the bottom of the stairs now, just a moment away, its arms reaching as they came closer, its mouth stretched out beyond its limits, revealing a bottomless void. I tried to speak to get away, but nothing came out but air as I exhaled. I thought about raising my arms to fight back, to maybe push it off of me, but my arms stayed lay limp at my side. I felt its large, bony hands on my shoulders and a tug as it pulled itself up to me. Its face was in mine, and the eyes locked onto it. I stared into infinity. I could feel the meaningless of existence. The dull echo of nothingness befilled my being. The vision around me, and whatever this thing was, went black. I could see the black void of its eyes in every moment. I had felt as if it was pouring out of me and into the eyes of this mouth of this monstrosity before me. The only thing I was able to remember was every instance of sadness I felt in my life, even things I shouldn't be able to remember. A pacifier that had laid inches just from me, out of reach, from a tiny pair of hands. A dog lying dead in the yard of an old home where I'd once lived. His lifeless body being picked up by my father. Him saying, "It'll be alright." A middle school dance where I sat alone on the bleachers watching the other kids dance with their partners as tears rolled down my face. I could remember the Christmas my father was laid off from work, with no presents under the tree. My parents were arguing over money, and my sister on the couch with her hands over her ears. I could remember all of it. And it felt like that was all that was left. Even when I tried to remember something about that was happier, I instead remember feeling useless. When I was out of a job, when my first daughter was only 4, and how hard it was on my wife and I. The sadness became intense, overwhelming, and then I heard the monster scream. Its mouth stretched further, its massive grip on my shoulders tightened. Was it going to swallow me whole? I couldn't do anything but watch. This was it, I thought. Was there ever going to be another chance for me to make it through the forest, or was I doomed from the beginning? I closed my eyes and waited for it to be over. Images of my children began to flash in front of me. Their smiling faces looking at me as I see them in snapshots of our lives. They were happy. An image of my wife flashed next as she was facing me with her hands on my cheeks, looking at me with love and warmth. Her eyes were telling me it was all right. I felt my left hand grab hold of something, and a moment later the monster screamed, louder this time, as if it was in pain. I opened my eyes just in time to watch the solid thing disintegrate into thin air. Its body was no longer solid. I could see through it. My eyes fell on the screen behind it. My character had made it across the riverwood. I looked down, and in my left hand was the controller. I somehow managed to make it out of the forest and into Whitewater Hold. It was over. I exited to the main menu, navigated to the mod section, where I found Oakaazadoreyth sitting in my download library. I scrolled down into it and tried to delete it, and this time it worked. It was finally gone. For good measure, I deleted all the mods that I had previously downloaded and exited the Xbox dashboard, where I was taking no chances. I found Skyrim in my games and apps and swiftly uninstalled the entire game, sitting there with my controller still in hand. I thought about everything that I had just witnessed. All the sadness and heartache that I felt. But it wasn't any match for the love I felt from my family. I stood up, not giving one more thought to the mod Oakaazadoreyth and the force that tormented me, and ultimately lost. I grabbed my phone, and I turned it on, finding my wife's number. And I pressed call.